welcome to my channel. It's been a while. I'm revamping my channel a bit. I've decided to kind of smudge together two of my passions, which is YouTube and history, and start doing some history related videos. So since it is spooky season, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to tell you all about the history of Halloween and how Halloween became what it is today. Almost every recorded civilization has a festival or ritual observance about what happens after you die, where you go, how we should honour the dead. For example, Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, like in Coco the film. Love that film so much. China has a tomb sweeping day, and Japan also has a similar day called Obon, something like that. But we are interested in the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, as what we know as Halloween originated as Samhain in the Celtic era. Now, the Celts lived 2,000 years ago in mainly modern day UK, Ireland and northern France. They celebrated their new year on November 1st, which was the end of the harvest, the end of summer and the start of the long, cold, dark, hard winter, which is a time associated with death. They believed that on the night before the new year, October 31st, the boundary between the worlds of the living and dead were blurred and the dead could return to Earth. They thought that otherworldly spirits caused trouble and caused damage to crops, and they also believed that their presence made it easier for the Druids, the Celtic priests, to make predictions about the future. These predictions were very important to them. In their lives, they didn't have electricity or supermarkets or anything. They relied on the natural land, so a lot could go wrong, and these predictions were an important source of comfort during the long winter. So on Samhain, celebrations would include they would let their hearth fires burn out while collecting the harvest, and then the Druids would light a sacred bonfire where people would gather to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the Celtic gods. They wore costumes which usually consisted of animal heads and skins. They believed that by dressing up as animals and monsters, it would mean that the fairies wouldn't be tempted to kidnap them on this night. So, not quite sure where that came from, but and they would also attempt to tell each other's fortunes. This honestly sounds like a vibe apart from the animal sacrifice and wearing animal heads and skins, but honestly I could get behind this lighting a bonfire and telling fortunes thing. Anyway, after the celebrations they would relight their hearth fires from the sacred bonfire, and they believed this would protect them through the winter. Then Christianity came along, of course. So you may have heard of some Christians kind of demonising Halloween and thinking that it's like Samhain is the Celtic god of death and Halloween is his feast, and kind of condemning Halloween, saying it's a bad thing. However, this is untrue, and it comes from a British engineer, not sure why an engineer, but he was a British engineer called Charles Valency, yeah. In the 1700s, he wrote about Samhain, but he didn't have an understanding of the culture and language, so he interpreted everything wrong, and what he said has been repeated ever since, when actually the Roman Church Christianised the festival and preserved the tradition. The Romans conquered most of the Celtic territory and ruled it for 400 years, and in this time two Roman festivals were kind of merged with Samhain. The first festival is called Feralia, and it was a Roman festival held in late October, and this was when the Romans would commemorate the passing of the dead. And the second festival was a festival to honour Panoma, who is the Roman goddess of fruit and trees. This was held around November 1st, and the symbol of Panoma was an apple, and this is actually where the tradition of apple bobbing came from. Ducking for apples was a courting ritual used by young men and women to kind of try and predict their relationships in the future, and this was carried on, and in medieval England it was a universal occupation for young people during Halloween. However, the church could not just let Samhain carry on, because it was not run by the church. So on May 13th of 609, Pope Boniface, let me see, how do you pronounce that? Anyway, we'll just presume that that's how you say it. Anyway, so Pope Boniface IV dedicated the Pantheon in Rome to all Christian martyrs, and then May 13th became All Martyrs' Day, which is basically a Catholic feast. But then Pope Gregory III came along in the 700s and decided that actually this day should celebrate all saints as well as all martyrs, and he decided that the festival should be moved from May the 13th to November 1st. So then November 1st became known as All Saints' Day, where they celebrated all the saints and martyrs in Christianity. By this point, Christianity had been spread into the Celtic lands by the Romans, so slowly the old Celtic traditions were being replaced by Christian traditions. However, in the year 1000, the church made a festival called All Souls' Day to be held on November 2nd, which was a day to commemorate the dead. It is widely believed that they were trying to replace Samhain with a church-sanctioned holiday because they couldn't have people celebrating a non-church sanctioned holiday like Samhain. Couldn't be celebrating anything if it wasn't Christian. All Souls' Day was celebrated very similarly to Samhain. They had bonfires, parades, and they dressed up in costumes. However, they would mostly dress up as angels, devils, and saints, not as animals. So now we have Samhain on October 31st, All Saints/Martyrs' Day on November 1st, and then All Souls' Day, which is the church-sanctioned version of Samhain, on November 2nd. All Hallowsmas was the Middle English term for All Saints' Day. So the night before All Saints' Day was October 31st, and this started becoming known as All Hallows' Eve. And over centuries, these three festivals merged into one, as we know, Halloween. However, the Catholic Church does still recognise All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, and Wiccans and pagans do celebrate Samhain still to this day. Everyone knows that on Halloween, children go around trick-or-treating, and an early form of this started on All Saints and All Souls' Day, when English people and Scottish people would go round souling. This is where poor people would visit the houses of wealthier people and they would receive a pastry called a soul cake, and in return they would pray for the souls of the homeowner's dead relatives. And later on, this practice was taken up by children who would go around asking for food, money and ale. A similar tradition happened in Scotland and Ireland that was called guising. So young people would dress up in costumes and go around houses, collecting treats, which was usually coins and nuts, and in return they would do a trick. This trick could be reciting a poem, singing a song, telling a joke or something similar. And these are two early forms of trick-or-treating. Another early form of trick-or-treating actually comes from bonfire night. Now, if you're not from the UK, you might not know what bonfire night is, so briefly, bonfire night or Guy Fawkes night is celebrated in the UK to commemorate a failed gunpowder plot that happened on November 5th of 1605. It was a Catholic-led plot to kill the current king, who was Protestant, King James I, by blowing up the Houses of Parliament. And basically, Guy Fawkes was the one who was caught underneath the Houses of Parliament with lots of gunpowder, so he was kind of a hated figure. However, there were a lot more conspirators in the plot as well. On the original Guy Fawkes Day, straight after his execution, people held bonfires to celebrate and would burn effigies of him and symbolic bones of the Catholic Pope. They really hated Catholics, clearly, so yeah. By the 1800s, on November 5th, children would roam the streets with effigies of Guy Fawkes and beg for pennies. So they would ask for a penny for the guy, and this is another similar tradition to modern day trick-or-treating. Halloween has been known as a night of violence in the past, which ranged from fairly harmless pranks to full-blown violence. So basically, when the Irish immigrated to the US to get away from the potato famine in the mid-1800s, they helped popularise Halloween over in America. And the Irish and Scottish communities brought over the traditions of souling and guising, as well as their traditions of Halloween pranks. In the late 1800s, common pranks included placing farmers' wagons and livestock on roofs, taking gates off their hinges so that livestock would escape, uprooting vegetables in backyards, tipping over outhouses, sometimes with people in them, and other such things. A particular prank that the Irish people did was tying strings to cabbages and pulling them through fields to scare people. And the Scottish did a similar thing, but they went up a level, the Scots, and they would take a cabbage, get it smoking and put it through people's keyholes so that their house would fill with a unpleasant odour. Not very pleasant. Fairly harmless pranks, but annoying. Some more notable Halloween pranks that happened. In 1879, the Louisville Short passenger train was passing through Newport in Kentucky when the train's engineer saw a body on the tracks. And clearly, if you were this train's engineer, you would be terrified. Seeing a body on the tracks, terrifying. Anyway, he stopped the train just in time. However, when he got out, he realised that it wasn't a body, it was just a stuffed figure, and there were 200 boys around the train tracks laughing at their Halloween prank. And things like this were expected at the time on Halloween, but can you imagine driving a train and seeing a body on the tracks and being so scared and managing to stop the train on time just to find that it was all a prank? You would be so annoyed. But also, the amount of people involved in this prank, 200 boys, and they managed to keep it quiet enough for no one to stop them, is just insane. Another notable prank was in 1900, University of Michigan students went into the anatomy lab and took a corpse and tied it to the front door of the building. An actual body. Like, imagine dying and your body going to the university to be studied, and they don't study it, they display it on their front door for a Halloween prank. Like, when cars were invented, this opened up a whole lot more opportunities for pranks. People would deflate tyres, remove manhole covers, and even put up signs, fake detour signs to confuse people. However, as the pranking spread into cities, things became more dangerous. People would set fires, break glass and trip pedestrians. One year in Kansas City, boys waxed the streetcar tracks on a steep hill, causing a vehicle to crash into another streetcar, which seriously injured a conductor. I feel like they got so lucky with this because someone could have died, it could have been so much worse, but they only injured one person, luckily. I mean, not luckily for them, but as the pranks got worse, things took a turn, and people did start to take up arms against pranksters. So for example, in 1907 in Tucson, Arizona, some pranksters stretched a wire across a sidewalk and tripped pedestrians, and one of the pedestrians pulled out a revolver and shot one of the pranksters dead. So yeah, something needed to be done about the Halloween chaos. And in Hiawatha, Kansas, there was a lady called Elizabeth Krebs who decided to do something about this. She was tired of the town being vandalised every year. In 1913, she used her own resources to organise a party for the young people, and she hoped to tire them out enough that they wouldn't then go on to vandalise the town. But she underestimated them, and the town was destroyed as usual. So then she came back in 1914. This time she involved the whole town. She brought in a band, hosted a costume contest, put on a parade, and this time her plan worked and everyone enjoyed the festival instead of being disruptive and destroying the town. Other towns soon adopted similar festivities, and Mrs. Krebs is sometimes known as the mother of modern Halloween for her impact on how Americans celebrate Halloween. The Halloween Frolic in Hiawatha and other similar festivals that were inspired by it still happen annually to this day, but this did not catch on nationwide. Things took a turn when the Great Depression hit in 1929. It worsened the issue of Halloween chaos and mischief, and it often devolved into violence, physical assault and vandalism, because apparently all that stuff's fun. But it was so bad that some cities considered banning Halloween. However, in the 1930s there was widespread community-based trick-or-treating, and this was likely to try and stop the excessive pranks. Since this was a difficult economic time, the communities would pool their resources. So each house would provide a different thing. For example, one house would provide a sheet for people to dress up as a ghost, another would provide soot to smudge on your face, another would provide treats, another would provide a room or a basement that was kind of a sort of haunted house type thing. So they really made it work for them. And eventually this morphed into kids going around houses trick-or-treating like what we see today. However, World War II quickly put a stop to this because of the sugar rations, meaning that people couldn't hand out as many treats. But after World War II, it came right back, and in the 50s, trick-or-treating became a regular thing that kids did every Halloween. And at this point, the candy companies realised that they could capitalise on this, and this was when they started making campaigns specifically geared towards Halloween. So it's safe to say that Halloween grew tamer with trick-or-treating becoming a part of American culture, but the mischief didn't go away. On the East Coast and in the Midwest, kids wanted to do both. They wanted to do trick-or-treating and Halloween mischief. So they moved the mischief to the night before October 30th, and this became known as Mischief Night, or in New Jersey it was known as Goosey Night. Pranks were usually along the lines of soaping windows, throwing eggs at houses, throwing toilet paper at houses over bushes and trees, spraying shaving foam everywhere, the usual kind of Halloween pranks that still happen sometimes today. So they're mostly harmless pranks, but annoying if you are on the receiving end of them. However, Michigan decided we're going to go harder, and in Michigan cities like Detroit and Flint, there was a lot of fires set. So it became known as Devil's Night. Particularly in the 70s and 80s, arsonists would set fire to trash cans and dumpsters and abandoned buildings in Detroit. And this peaked in 1984 when 800 fires were set across a 3-day arson spree around Halloween. This resulted in a dawn to dusk curfew for unaccompanied under 18s and a city watch being mobilised. The number of fires on Halloween in Detroit has gradually decreased, and it is near normal levels, which I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, I guess there's not as many. On to my favourite part, the history of pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns. So jack-o'-lanterns are said to originate from an Irish myth about a man called Stingy Jack. Story time! One night, Stingy Jack invited the devil to have a drink with him. However, being stingy, as his name suggests, Jack did not want to pay for this drink. So he persuaded the devil to turn himself into a coin so that they could pay for their drinks. The devil did this, but Jack decided he was going to keep the money instead of paying, and he put the coin in his pocket next to a silver cross, meaning that the devil could not transform back into himself. Jack eventually freed the devil on the condition that the devil would not bother him for 1 year and that the devil could not claim his soul after he died. But the next year, Jack tricked the devil again into climbing a tree to pick a piece of fruit. While he was up the tree, Jack drew a cross on the tree, carved a cross into the tree's bark, which meant that the devil could not come down the tree until he had promised not to bother Jack for another 10 years. When Jack died, God would not let such an unsavoury figure come into heaven, and obviously the devil was quite upset with Jack, but he did keep his word and did not claim his soul and would not allow him into hell. Instead, he sent Jack off into the dark night with only a burning coal to light his way. Jack put the coal into a carved out turnip and has been roaming the earth ever since. So the Irish began to refer to Jack's ghostly figure as Jack of the Lantern, and this was shortened to Jack-o'-lantern, and that is where the name comes from. So in Ireland and Scotland, people started making their own versions of Jack's lamp by carving scary faces into turnips or potatoes and placing them by a window or by the door to frighten away Stingy Jack and other evil spirits wandering around. In England, they did something similar, but they used large beets instead of turnips and potatoes, apparently. Seems to me that a turnip and potato would be a lot more suited, but a beetroot, of course. Then Irish and British immigrants brought this tradition across to America, where there was a Native American crop, the pumpkin, and they thought, oh, we could use these pumpkins for Halloween to carve our jack-o'-lanterns, and that is why we now use pumpkins, which are way better than a turnip or a potato or a beet, in my opinion. However, there is an alternative origin to the pumpkin, slightly less exciting than the story of Stingy Jack, but we move. So for this alternative origin, we have to go back to the Celts and sowing. So remember that sowing was the end of the harvest, so people had easy access to lots of root vegetables. And remember how they would let their hearth fires die out while collecting the harvest and then relight their fires from the sacred bonfire? Well, they needed something to carry the coals in from the sacred bonfire. And since metal lanterns were expensive, it is said that they would use carved out root vegetables. And it's thought that they would carve faces on them to ward off restless spirits. However, some historians think that they started carving faces onto the root vegetables for a more practical reason, a more boring reason. Just so that the lanterns could provide light while not blowing the coal out. So by not extinguishing the ember. I think the Stingy Jack tale is a lot more interesting, but yeah. When the Christians arrived, they reinterpreted the lanterns as the souls of Christians in purgatory, or representations of the Christian souls in purgatory. And of course, the Stingy Jack tale does fit into the Christian realm, the Christian with heaven and hell and the devil and everything. However, you do see similar customs all around the world. Lighting candles is a near universal way that cultures beckon the dead, who still call them back for a night. So Mexicans light candles in the Dia de los Muertos festival, and the Japanese also light candles in their festival Obon, however you pronounce it. They light a four-sided paper lantern and put it on a wooden raft and send them down the rivers to guide their beloved spirits back to them on the Day of the Dead. And it kind of makes you wonder if we're missing something, like ancient cultures on opposite sides of the world do very similar things to commemorate the dead, and I don't know, like what made people on opposite sides of the world believe something so similar? I don't know. Oh, my cape, what's this called? This thing, it's bugging me, it keeps falling everywhere. Anyway, the origin of the haunted house is thought to be in 1802. Yeah, 1802, when Marie Tussaud put on a Chamber of Horrors at her wax museum in London. This featured decapitated figures from the French Revolution, and it was very scandalous at the time. People were not impressed. But then the first kind of commercial haunted house, similar to what we know now, was in 1915 in Liphook, Hampshire in England, and you can actually still see it and ride it now. It has been refurbished throughout the years, but you can still go to it. It is at the Hollycombe Steam Museum thing in Liphook, so if you want to go. If you're near Hampshire, in Hampshire nearby, you can go and see this ghost house was what it was called. I think it's the Haunted Cottage was its official name, but now it's known as the Orton and Spooner Ghost House. That's the one. Anyway, it had dim lights, floors that shook, and demonic screams. And then we have the haunted houses that we already talked about during the Great Depression, when parents wanted to get the kids off the streets. This then led to larger organisations setting up their own haunted houses, whether this was for fundraisers or for a commercial attraction. And then Walt Disney came along. Of course he did. And in 1969, Disneyland's Haunted Mansion opened at the original Disneyland in Anaheim, California, of course. And this Haunted Mansion had very high production value for its time. And since then, haunted attractions have become more and more elaborate. So costumes have been a part of Halloween since the very beginning, all the way back when the Celts celebrated Samhain. They would dress up, and obviously we still do that now. But Halloween costumes used to be more geared towards spooky themes and not towards current events. So for example, like how everyone last year wanted to dress up as Wednesday, and everyone this year wants to dress up as Barbie, because those are the big TV series or movies that year. I do think that this is more of an American thing, but it has become a lot more common in Britain in the last kind of 5-10 years. I kind of feel I feel like when I was a kid, it was more about kind of you dress up as something spooky like a witch or a devil or a whatever. But now in the UK, it's getting kind of more and more kind of like how it is in the US, where you dress up as whatever you want to. So the goal used to be not to dress up as kind of a particular creature or character, but to conceal your identity using spooky themes for like witches, devils, black cats and stuff like that. And obviously costumes, particularly throughout the 1900s, had a lot of insensitive and racist themes. Still to this day. But so things like terpenes were culturally appropriated, white Americans wore blackface to portray African Americans. Similar things probably happened in the UK, but I didn't see that in my research. And Native American and traveller culture was appropriated, and this still happens. I hear about it all the time on social media. And then there was that trend last year, was it last year? Last year or a couple years ago, where people were dressing up as Jeffrey Dahmer, which is a whole other issue. Yeah, so when you're picking your Halloween costume, maybe stay away from serial killers and other cultures and go for go for Barbie or a witch or, you know, a superhero. Yeah. But it was in the 1930s when neighbourhoods started organising events that the costumes became more important but less scary. So children began dressing up as characters from like radio shows and comics and movies. And in the 1950s, mass-produced costume boxes started becoming more affordable, and kids would dress up as specific things like princesses, mummies, or specific characters like Batman. And then you have the sexy costumes that are primarily targeted at women, and this started kind of around the 1960s, and by the 1990s sexy versions of store-bought costumes became like an established commercial product. So, Halloween in Britain. I feel like I've talked a lot about Britain at the start of this video and then America towards the middle and end. And I just wanted to kind of sum up Halloween in Britain, since I am British. So traditionally in Britain, Halloween is celebrated by children's games like bobbing for apples, telling ghost stories and carving faces into vegetables. Pumpkins are a fairly recent import from the US, and although trick-or-treating got its origins from the UK and Ireland, trick-or-treating as we know today is really an import from the US. And it's kind of the same with haunted houses. I mean, it started in the UK, and a haunted house is like a traditional British fairground attraction, but they were taken to America and made bigger, and then we're kind of seeing that bigger American style haunted house come to the UK. And that is what I've learned about the history of Halloween. If I got anything wrong or you know anything more, then please let me know in the comments. I have linked where I got all my information in the description if you wanted to go and check out the articles. But I hope that you have a great Halloween, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!